Cheers. Good to see you. I think that a lot of people would love to hear your perspective on a few things, especially being you've lived in Etobicoke now for quite some time.
Most of my life.
Most of your life? How long?
Well, I lived in Rexdale. I grew up in Rexdale, so.
Yeah.
But it was all farm country when I grew up there. It's not, you can't compare it to the way it is today.
So
it was a different place.
Let's talk about that. Like, what was life like in Rexdale? What year are we talking? How long did you live there?
64 till about probably 75, 77, 78. More or less around there. I was in and out a few times later. But I think I left when I was about 21. But it was when I first moved there, it was like there were cows down the end of the street and horses and oats and barley fields, and you were out in the country.
Yeah.
I go up there now. I was up there a couple of years ago, and I don't recognize the place. It's just totally different. And then my nephew, he grew up in our house too, my sister's oldest son, and he had a totally different Rexdale experience, because by that time you were getting a lot of apartments and immigrants coming in. And
by what time do you think? What year?
Oh, he was born in about 71, maybe about 85 when he started going to high school. And then, like most of his friends were black.
So, and just to clarify, he's white, correct? Like,
oh yeah, he's white. His wife is black and his kids are mixed, and but I mean, just growing up and living here, I don't even, I don't think about biracial. You're just mate, and we grew up in kind of the same atmosphere. I mean, you're aware of it, but it's not.
So from your perspective, it was never a matter of biracial or black or white. It was just people that you saw.
People you connect with.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny because when I was a kid, you'd say Toronto was smaller and quainter and nicer and cleaner and just ever so boring, because now with all the immigrants, there's so many places you can go and things you can do and things you can learn, and restaurants and the food and the experience of living here is just, it's way more dynamic than it was when I was a kid, and it was just very plain. So, sometimes people go, oh, the good old days when things were, Toronto was a lot smaller. I liked the size of the city, but now the dynamic of the city is just far surpasses any of the negatives that always come along with the city growing, and growing as fast as it did.
Mm-hmm.
But what are we now? I think over 50%. I think officially now it's over 50% of Toronto is immigrants. So,
that's a good thing to you.
Oh yeah, of course. Like I said, the experiences you get, and just going out to restaurants and food and the people you meet. Even when I was in my 20s, I started teaching English to refugees. Most of them were from Latin America, South America, Central America, and those relationships, I got to travel, I got to know them and then say, oh, go visit my family. So I've traveled all over Central America and a lot South America, and it's been an amazing experience. And that wouldn't have happened if there was just a plain city like it was when I was a kid. So the immigration experience has really been profound in my life as well. It's just like it's really shaped my life, where I've traveled, things I've done, and it's been great.
But you would agree that diversity, it's way better to have different ethnicities, different cultures, so you can experience more.
Yeah.
What I was hearing from you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you feel more accomplished, more of a person, more of a rounder person, because you've got to experience these other cultures.
Yeah, and the thing is, I got to experience them here from other people's perspective, but then by traveling to their country, I got to really see how they lived, and so it's been a great experience. you know, a lot of people work all their lives and then they retire and want to travel. And I did a lot of that traveling when I was younger and really got to enjoy it and really got to experience it. And it was fantastic. It was great. Like right now, even when the pandemic's over, I don't feel like I have to go anywhere. There's so much going on in the city. There's so many little diverse places that you can go to and experience the culture and the food. Not in the same way as if you went to the country, but it just is, it's very, very enriching and very eye-opening. And tasty, because the food's always good.
So I'm going to ask you an interesting question, okay? Especially with all of your experience. The question is, what is your earliest account, or the first thing that you could remember you experiencing real racism?
That is really hard to say because racism has evolved, and it still is evolving, which is a good thing. Because things you could say and do when I was a kid that were not considered racist are just off the table today. You wouldn't dare say or imply those things. When people say things have changed, they definitely have. But they need to change more because, you know, I think with so much influence from the States, we were looking more at the hatred, the violence, and we were missing the subtlety, the subtle things, and I can't even say they're subtle. They were just more subtle than the more blatant things that we would see on TV. So we always consider ourselves not to be.
I know you're trying to be. I know you're trying to be careful about what you say, but like,
yeah.
Can you give me some real examples?
When I was a kid, the very first black girl that came to our school, we were told, "Oh, you just treat them all the same." Well, she had a funny last name. So what do we do when you're 10 years old? You tease kids. Today they call it bullying. Now, you know, then it was just, bullying was force, you know, violent hitting and threatening. Now, I think a lot of what we considered to be teasing when I was a kid is bullying, and it should be. But so it was a different form of bullying, but still bullying all the same. But she had a funny last name. So what did you do when you were 10 years old? We made fun of her last name. You know, we just were like, you got it. And she got very upset. And I remember getting pulled aside by a teacher and just saying, you're making fun of her because she's black. And I was just going, no, yeah, you are. And I mean, I knew right away. I was just like, there's no way around this. So I was told, you can't do that, can't say that. But I was teasing, you know, as a group we would tease other kids. And after that, I remember I was afraid to talk to black people when they started coming to the school, because I thought if I acted normal, then it may be perceived as different. Yeah. So I always feel bad about that, because I think there's a girl out there somewhere who maybe thinks that I was teasing her because of her color. But nonetheless, I was teasing her because it's something different. And I think that's the point. If you have a funny last name and people make fun of it, that's probably considered racist today. So back then, I didn't quite grasp it. I was just kind of going like, no, I would have to be specifically because of the color of the skin. But then, you know, I think it was about 2 or 3 years later, this is a part that gets me. 2 or 3 years later, we were doing a play at school. And she got called into the room before we did the play, along with another girl that was black and her younger brother that we were in middle school then, got pulled into the school. And we're told not to take offense because they used the N-word in the play. It was a musical from England, and they used the word, and it was not considered in a derogatory way, but it was by today's standards. Again, things have changed. But I remember them because I was actually standing right there when they got pulled up, and we were all standing together, and the teacher said, "We're going to use this word, don't take offense." And the girl that I had been teasing kind of looked at me and she went, "What does she mean? I don't know what she means." And I said, "I don't know either," because I didn't know the word was going to be used in the play.
Yeah.
And I could tell she was confused and probably upset because, the teacher said the word, but I mean, right to her. And I'm thinking she might have been about 12 or 13. And then
So we're talking like 67, 68-ish?
I would say, 60, you're right. And it wasn't until later that I hitchhiked across Canada when I was 16 and started going through towns that you felt the difference. You felt people looking at you and going like, why are you in our area? And other people like, why are you talking to them? That I really got that there was this really negative relationship between First Nations and white people. Because in our community, it was just a family here and a family there. So it's totally different when you go up north and come into a town and there's a First Nations, a lot of First Nations people there, and then you have white people as well, and then you get this friction, and it was kind of like, I remember talking to this guy when I was hitchhiking there. I was like 16. He's just like really cold, and I knew that there was something, and I didn't learn about too much later on because, again, when you're a kid, you're just figuring, well, this is great. This is a good thing. Why would it be considered a bad thing? That part of it, this is probably why we get brainwashed into thinking that, oh, we're not racist and we're not this and we're not that. But if you get a lot of one group coming into a neighborhood, like any group, and all of a sudden they start upsetting your dynamic, then all of a sudden, that's when it starts to come up. Like, a few of you are fine. Don't bring the rest of them. We don't want to have our neighborhood overtaken, kind of thing.
You would agree, like, Toronto's motto is diversity, our strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that so interesting that we still find a lot of racism and different things that are happening here. But hearing your perspective of someone who's, essentially lived here most of their life and got to see things change from Rexdale being farmland to now essentially being apartments and residential areas and a lot of more industrial things and whatever. It's just exploded.
It's got a very high immigrant population.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, Middle East. It's totally different today. And when I was up there, I didn't feel out of place. I didn't feel bad. And I'll hear people, it's funny because I'll say to people, oh, yeah, I grew up in Rexdale, and I go, oh. And
Yeah,
no.
Oh, now I figured it out now.
No, it was totally different when I grew up.